everyone, I'm Jaslyn Bay. Today we are going to talk about scaling into Southeast Asia. Let me do some brief introduction before we go into the topic. Okay. So Blackstone Consulting, for those who do not know about Blackstone Consulting, we are actually a Singapore-based business scaler where we scale company in Southeast Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. Okay, so other than that, we do also have office in Thailand, Taiwan, and Malaysia. So in case, if you are curious, like why we are called Blackstone, we are not Blackstone, we are also not BlackRock, Blackstone, meaning that, we would like ourselves as well as our client to be profitable and aggressive. Okay, black meaning always in black, not having red in your, P&L, and aggressive as fast as storm itself. Okay. So these are the few areas that we actually do. We do a lot of market entry activities, helping companies coming from, as far as, New York. Okay, today we also have Nancy who can actually share a little bit about, situation in New York and, some American company who are interested to actually learn more about, how to enter Southeast Asia. We can also, address that question itself. Okay. So we help with the pre-entry strategy setup. So before you actually spend huge resources setting up a huge team in the new market, we can actually be the one to actually be the arms and leg to kickstart the market. Okay, so definitely there are also business matching activities that we actually do, helping companies when they first enter the market to have, probably first POC cases, first, commercial case. So these are a few things that we actually do. So other than that, we also help some, SME and corporates to look into their structuring portion, especially when it comes to like looking into the people product process, helping them to achieve certain objectives. It could be objective like, fundraising, or it could be objective to actually ensure that the company longevity is actually long enough. Okay, so that's where a lot of strategy work will be, will happen during the process of corporate restructuring. And lastly, what we always do, in most cases will be scaling the businesses, in a way looking for the right partner as well as helping, business development as a service, which is actually pretty similar as you enter a new market. But it's just that, we don't just do it for companies who want to cross border. Internally within the market itself, they are also able to actually scale. So these are the few areas that we actually do. So this is an overview of the partners and our experience working with different brands, different size of the company. So we do work closely with like government agency when it comes to like doing immersion tour, business matching. At the same time, also helping some of the startup who are interested to do cross-border activities. So this is what we usually do. Other than that, for corporates, usually they will be looking for new solution. So we do also help them in terms of the structuring portion while looking for new solution. So SME and scale up, so a mixture of them from different country, different region, communities, as well as a range of like startups. So three of us, because we are also mentors in few startup programs. So if you actually see us somewhere, this is what we actually do on a regular basis too. So I'm Jaslyn, the Group CEO of Blackstone Consulting. Basically, a lot of activities in terms of like structuring operationally, as well as going overseas in some of the markets. You can actually feel free to actually speak to me on that. So I'll leave it to the two other speakers to actually have an introduction of themselves. Maybe you can start out with Paddy first.
Hi, thanks. Okay, just in case some of you may be wondering, we were supposed to have another speaker. So I'm actually the replacement. Mubin, there was a in emergency at his place, so that's why I'm the replacement here. Okay, thanks, Jaslyn. So I'm also I'm actually the managing partner, based here in Singapore from Blackstone Consulting. So as similarly like Jaslyn, we serve similar functions. Okay, we serve quite a fair bit of clients, from your startups all the way to the some of the listed companies and all that. It's just that on my side here, I'm more on the strategy side. That means what I mainly do, focus a lot on the strategy, focus a lot on the executions. It can go from something that is a very small, local, to something that is more on the regional or even global. So far on the Blackstone side, we have actually worked with quite a fair bit of companies. Some of them are actually listed companies. Some of them have already invested, and they gotten people like us to help them to scale, help them to structure. So I'm more in charge of mainly in the regional side. So yeah, thank you very much. Nancy?
Sure. My name is Nancy Hulla. I'm New York based, so the lone American on this call right now. I've been doing global expansion for companies, both corporate startups and also SMEs as well. I'm currently a Techstars mentor at the moment. I know that some of you probably know that. I also work with a lot of venture capital and corporate venture capital here in the US and internationally. Was Europe-based for 13 years, and I'll be talking about the American aspect. Ran my own company as well. Met Patty and Jeslyn a number of years ago, so doing this for quite a long time with them. And I'm really happy to be here to talk about the Americans going into Southeast Asia, and maybe even for the Southeast Asian companies looking to expand within the region as well. But very excited to talk about this and give it back to Jeslyn.
All right. Good morning, Nancy. So yeah, Nancy has been a great partner, with us also. As you know, if you actually look at some of the event that we actually did previously, we also successfully did some cases in as far as Finland, and she now is actually based in New York, helping a lot of companies and investors in New York to look at various opportunities with Southeast Asia. Okay, so it's actually very exciting to have Nancy here today to actually spice out the whole discussion, while we will share some of the insights of how to actually look into scaling into Southeast Asia today, and some of the facts and figures that might be helpful for you when it comes to planning for the entry. All right. Okay, so this is the agenda of today. 4 main things that we'll be talking about, and lastly, we will also have a case study. So if you have any question, feel free to actually leave a message at the chat box. We will have around 15 minutes to actually answer that set of questions that you actually have. Okay, so we start off with the latest business opportunity in Southeast Asia, and then moving forward, we will have this navigating the startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia. So if some of you are in the startup space, and then thirdly, we'll have Nancy to share a little bit about the common challenges of American business in Southeast Asia. So for those who are not from America, so I think this will be interesting perspective also coming from someone who is based in America to share about what do they think about Southeast Asia for now, right? And then lastly, we'll have this setting up business in Southeast Asia. Okay. So latest business opportunity in Southeast Asia. Just a key start to give an overview to everyone. These are the few countries, some of the popular one, in terms of company wanting to actually, enter. So just an overview of the kind of industry that we are mainly focused on in different country over here. Okay, so as you can see, Singapore, you don't see a lot of verticals that are popular, but doesn't mean that there isn't any activities, much activity in this different industry. It's just that at different phases of time, it will be different focus. So you can see that manufacturing is pretty much over in most of the country, but in terms of manufacturing, the definition is actually pretty much different in different country. Like for example, sharing the perspective of Singapore, most of the manufacturing will be more towards the high-tech manufacturing or biomedical manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing. So it will be more towards that area. So but when it comes to say food manufacturing or semiconductor supply chain manufacturing, it will be lesser due to the small land over here in Singapore. Okay, so automotive will be very popular in places like Thailand as well as Malaysia, and for Indonesia also for some of the cases. So different country have their different focus on this few industry itself. But definitely some prominent one in terms of tourism, it can actually we can see that it's actually pretty much emerging, where it actually show there are gaps of opportunity for companies who want to look into expanding here in this field industry itself. Okay. So financial service, Singapore has been a financial hub, and it will be continue as a financial hub in Singapore itself, as compared to other places in Southeast Asia. But I also take note that there are also companies like fintech companies that may be based in Singapore as a headquarter, but when it comes to like creating product itself, it may not be just for Singapore itself. Okay. Take note that a lot of times companies where it comes to headquarters in Singapore, like a startup, fintech startup, their strategy is actually looking into developing and emerging markets to actually solve the unbanked and underbanked issue. So do actually read this in a different perspective itself. Okay. So these are some of the facts and figures in terms of like why Southeast Asia, in terms of population, is actually growing pretty fast. We see a lot of like migration coming into this region, and also there are also few key areas that is actually developing fast. The reason also why is because in Europe, of course, in terms of like sustainability, that we do know a lot of different policy, different scheme that actually encourage people to look into sustainability. So as a result, due to the supply chain that has been ongoing, whereby Southeast Asia country have been supporting a lot of like parts or supplying a lot of like solution or products over to Europe. A lot of companies are also looking into how do they actually ensure that they are abiding the sustainable goals, right, that have been set years back. So 2030 will be a very interesting year that we are actually looking into, and we see quite a lot of like solutions focusing in this renewable energy and sustainability areas itself. Okay, so supportive government policy, yes, FDI are always pretty receptive in some of the market in Southeast Asia. Also, it can be tricky in some of the markets. So many times, due to the cultural differences, it can actually set some barrier, while at the same time it also set some opportunity for some people who are able to actually access the market. So later there will be slides talking about some of the program or policy that you may want to actually look into if you are looking into different markets in Southeast Asia. Okay, we see Southeast Asia as different markets, different countries itself, due to the vast difference. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, the last thing, of course, geopolitical situation do actually affect Southeast Asia, while at the same time it does also benefit some of the region. Like for example, one of the famous case is the manufacturing, where Vietnam grew very fast within the past few years due to the geopolitical differences. So I won't cover too much on that. Yeah. So in summary, these are some of the main promising industry in Southeast Asia. Vietnam, as I actually briefly covered. Okay. Also due to the trade war, many of them are actually shifting activities here, and but because of that, it also resulted in the increase of like cost. Like for example, places like Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi are the two popular areas in Vietnam in terms of businesses. It's actually getting very expensive now. Some of the partners of ours also share about the cost is actually getting close. Some of the talent to hire, right, can get as close as the cost of hiring them in Singapore. So you can see that due to the talent demand, where say industry like cryptocurrency, where a lot of projects were there, so you actually increase some of the cost of some of the talent over there. Okay. Digital economy, definitely due to the unbanked and underbanked situation and the underdeveloped infrastructure in some region, some parts of Southeast Asia. There's opportunity, but it seems like it's actually dropping also. So the strategy now may not be just looking into digitalizing everything for now, but in terms of the growth rate, as comparing to like Europe and US, there's still a vast difference for now due to the emerging trend itself. Yeah. So on the right, you can see some of the different areas that are focused over here in Southeast Asia for the past few years, and likely will stay for the next few years. Okay, so some findings, fintech is actually the largest sector by deals and value in terms of the fundraising as well as the volume itself. But of course, it's also because there are huge company or, we call it, say, unicorn, bigger company, IHQ, say GoTo, Grab, Alibaba, Sea Group. So these are also the reason why it seems like it's so huge over here. And also due to the fintech nature, right? The volume usually will be higher for that. Okay, so that also you may want to take note when it comes to reading all this study itself. Okay, so Grab, GoTo. Grab is actually in Singapore. GoTo Indonesia. So Alibaba regional HQ in Singapore is from China, and then Sea Group itself, based in Singapore, they do gaming as well as e-commerce, like Shopee itself. Yeah. So they are merged as well as SPAC situation happening. So yeah, so that also resulted in that. Okay. So since like renewable energy, green energy has been a topic, recently. So we actually did a compile of some of the trends that we in this few countries itself. So as you can see over here, these are some of the policy that have been set in place. And in fact, actually recently we actually brought quite a few companies looking into the green vertical itself. So there are quite a few interesting trends, like government have to actually procure a portion of their budget, right, on green certified product. Like for example, in Malaysia, they have a scheme like MyHijau, things like that. Okay, so and in fact, just last week, Paddy and myself, we were also in Bangkok, also looking at opportunity in the carbon space. Things are moving very fast over there. Many companies are looking into it also due to the 2030 policy that have been set globally. Okay, so a lot of policy are actually set using the framework. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, also leave it to you to actually read a little bit more if you're interested in renewable energy on that, because it definitely will also affect some of the other businesses that may not be directly relevant but indirectly affecting, like for example, as close as retail space. Okay, retail industry definitely will be relevant, infrastructure, manufacturing. So that's why this is actually very important, and it may affect some of the cost and margin of yours. Okay, so the next one is navigating startup ecosystem. I'll leave it to Paddy to share a little bit more on that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so for this particular topic, when we talk about the Southeast Asia ecosystem, startup ecosystem, on the very top, that a lot of companies that are looking to enter into Southeast Asia. One of the biggest drive could have actually be that a lot of countries, if you look at on the screen itself, we have countries from Myanmar to Vietnam to Philippines to Indonesia and so on and so forth. So why the high interest of entering into Southeast Asia? I think a couple of them can be the push and the pull. One of those is actually the China-US trade war. Okay, because of that, it also created a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of war. Okay, WALL. It created a lot of very high, risk for a lot of companies who have been so used to doing businesses between both US and China. So that's why for a lot of other companies, they start to look into, hey, rather than being caught in between the two giants, maybe we can actually look into countries, like those are in Southeast Asia. where a lot of the countries are actually putting themselves together to have certain policies to be a bit more friendly to do business with each other. And also at the same time, I think just like many other countries, no, some of them actually have been have to so-called if you were to pick one side, you probably cannot work on the other side. So in Southeast Asia itself, a lot of them try to be as neutral as possible. So this is where things can get actually, you can probably have the best of both worlds, as some may say. So that's why for a lot of our companies, especially those startups, funded startups overseas, they tend to look into Southeast Asia, partly because of a couple of reasons. As I mentioned just now, political is one. The other one is actually the financial. Okay, financial in the sense that some of these in the Southeast Asia can be considered as a developing country or developed country. And because most of us are actually using our own local currency, while as much as it's pegged into US dollar, but it also means that there's an opportunity to earn much more, partly is because of, let's say, for example, we have clienteles that are as far as from US, where to them is that I'm actually using Sing dollar versus a US dollar. So with the strength, the strengthening of the US dollar, so when they enter into Southeast Asia, they can actually play a role in terms of the currency exchange. So this is why a lot of companies, like especially those in the US, Canada, or even in Europe, when they see that with the exchange rate and of course the cost of living, cost of running businesses as compared to maybe your Silicon Valley, maybe you're in Germany or whatever. So to them, they feel that we have quite a fair bit of supports that can be the prices of hiring, the prices of running the operations can be fairly competitive. So this actually resulted in a huge drive from overseas coming into Southeast Asia. And as I mentioned on the screen itself, you can probably see that in fact it's actually up and coming. In terms of the unicorns, in terms of the startups, it can actually be gaining a lot of traction. And also some of the countries share very, very similar culture, very similar practices. So as much as to enter into Southeast Asia, it can be complicated, it can be complex. But once you figure it out, you can actually go from one place to another place. Especially like, for example, like recent years, we've been seeing a lot of companies overseas entering into Southeast Asia, especially to countries like Indonesia or countries like Malaysia or even Brunei, because of they have a very common religion in terms of like the Muslim. So a lot of them look into the halal food, look into the purchasing power stronger. So this is also one of the biggest opportunity that we start to see, especially in the past one year, 2 year. Next. Okay, so these are the key verticals. I won't be going into each and every one of them, but if you just look into the amount raised, well, it can from the health tech all the way to logistic. Let me just point straight into the logistic side. One of the biggest problem that we have is that as a Southeast Asia, even though we are all nearby to each other, if you were to fly, taking a budget airlines or whatsoever, from Singapore to Thailand to Malaysia to Indonesia, usually it's within a couple of hours, and it's actually very, very short. But however, logistics itself proved to be a huge market to a lot. This is why one of the key verticals that's growing rapidly. Let's just use Indonesia as a very classic example. Indonesia itself, we are talking about hundreds of millions of people. If I'm not wrong, I think they hit about 270, 290 millions population, and they are spread over thousands of islands, and they are spread over a mass piece of land. So this also creates a lot of opportunities where how do you get point A to point B, or how do you get someone who actually order on the e-commerce platform, and how do you get them from one place to another place? So now it's not just about being efficient, but you also have to be effective. Like what Jesslyn mentioned, especially more on the ESG sustainability. So which is why now we start to see a lot of logistic company, e-commerce companies, or even health tech, fintech. They start to move into not just providing solutions, but they try to make sure that some of their solutions can actually adapt to be friendly to the environment, to be sustainable to the environment. And this becomes a very hot topics for a lot of companies that before we even start any business start running, can we actually understand what does the ecosystem needs? And now with a lot of the government start to push on all the carbon credits and compliance, sustainability and all this, it's actually the pivoting point where a lot of investors start to look into, should I actually just go into investing companies that actually start to adopt and start to adapt what a better world, what a better environment would be. So this is also why quite a handful of companies that are a bit more friendly to the environment, they tend to get a bit more notice by the investors also. Next. Yep. Okay. So these are the few key players. I won't be going in to read everything, but if you look at it, let's first and foremost let's look at the size of the country first. Okay. Amongst Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, your Vietnam, your Indonesia, and so on and so forth. Or even Philippines and all this. In fact, if in terms of the country itself, Singapore is actually the smallest. Just a small little islands in Indonesia itself is already thousands of multiple times of Singapore. So which is why, because of this, it also means that the so-called the play by the government, by the local governments, is also very different. Let's just start off straight from Singapore side, which is on top left. Okay. First and foremost, when we talk about the key players, while they may have different names across the different countries, but the roles and responsibility may be similar, but the play is actually very different. Like in Singapore itself, Singapore is very small, so we don't have really much resources. So because of not much resources, so what they always do is that they actually tap on the talent. That means instead of not trying to look into the mass, they actually look into the small population that we have. And then, of course, the stability of the political situations. So they tend to tap onto this and then to bring companies that wants to land in Southeast Asia. The positioning has always been land in Singapore. And then from Singapore side, you can actually jump into Malaysia or jump into Thailand or whichever, so that they create a platform for you to have access to investors, access to family office and stuff like that. Okay, like for example, even like Malaysia, MDEC, Cradle, and a lot of other accelerator programs has actually been very involved, very active. They also have they play a very similar role, just like many other government agencies. But however, the play will be a bit different. Malaysia, by and large itself, is many times bigger than Singapore, and they got very long shoreline and lots of agricultures, a lot of land. So that's why the play that they have is also quite different. And in terms of the numbers of cities are definitely much more than Singapore. So that's why you can see a lot of powerhouse like in KL, Kuala Lumpur, Johor, Penang. So a lot of these key players, they may actually play according to their strength in the states that they are in. Maybe like, for example, like in Pahang, okay, they may be focusing a lot in the agri-tech, or maybe in Sarawak, which is in East Malaysia. So a lot of these folks, they will always play according to the strength. So that when that happens, companies that want to enter into Southeast Asia, especially foreign companies want to enter in Southeast Asia, let's say for the west side, they should actually first and foremost understand what does each and every of these agencies or government sectors, what role do they actually play? Like example, like in Thailand, Thailand, you can see that okay, there's a change of government. Now they got a huge coalitions government, so the policy may actually change. So this doesn't mean that the adaptability is not there. This also means that companies who want to enter into countries like Thailand, they may actually not looking at Thailand alone. They may be looking at CLMV. That means land in Thailand, but from here you jump into Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, or Vietnam. Okay, why? Partly it's because the distribution channels, the relationship, the partners that they already have with CLMV had already been established for at least for the past 30, 50, 60 years already. So that's why a lot of our companies, when they enter, they may actually have a different play. So in the case of Thailand, they may actually enter into Thailand, but the focus, it may not be just Thailand alone. Okay, so now then let's look at Philippines and look at Vietnam or even Indonesia. Okay, just like these, like Malaysia, Philippines itself also has a very, their shoreline is also very prominent. So this also means that a lot of startups may actually want to tap onto this because there's a lot of shipping, there's a lot of transactions, and as we all know, Philippines is also one of the biggest, largest country that depends a lot on the foreign exchange. in terms of the domestic markets and in some of the overseas markets. So this also make it very, reasonable in terms of setting up your offices, setting up your, support center, call centers, and all these into Philippines. But especially now with the, the new government, the recent one, you can see that there's a lot of push to engage potential investors, potential companies from overseas to come in to look into the M&A also. Okay, then the other one is, of course, Vietnam. As we all know, because of the political situations, so Vietnam also benefit one of the country that actually benefit the most also, especially when it comes to the manufacturing. As we all know, manufacturing itself, by and large, it's not just manufacturing 1.0. Even like today, we are talking about 3.0, 4.0, or even coming to 5.0. So they themselves actually are able to, put in, because they have a very large, very young populations. So going into that, into the manufacturing, so there's a lot of new ideas. There's a lot of drive being pushed. Okay, last but not least, one of the largest country is actually Indonesia in terms of the land size, the massive. They are very, very supportive of local startups. Okay, this is no doubt. A lot of their government policy from the states or province, they're actually very, very supportive. For example, a couple of our partners that we work with in Indonesia, you can see that they are not looking just internally within their city, first tier city, second tier city, but also to openly, put their startups overseas to look into expanding. But partly it's because in terms of the culture, in terms of language, and this actually make it easier for them to access out from Indonesia, but yet at the same time, suitable for overseas companies to enter to do partnership also. Okay, next. Okay, so this is so next one is actually the common challenges for American business in Southeast Asia. So this one, I will pass it over to Nancy, where she's the expert on that. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm coming from the American side, so it's a little bit different than a lot of the regional partners that you have right now, because it is quite a vast difference coming from the US into Southeast Asia, due to a lot of Americans, a lot of companies come from very corporate type of attitude. They have a very type of, hey, we come from matrix organizations. It takes a lot of time to be able to make decisions. So these are a couple of things that we just thought of as we started taking a look at the differences between Americans and Southeast Asian companies as they do expansion. So one of the big things is cultural difference. What happens here is in the US, we have a very business-like corporate mentality where professional and personal relationships are kept very separate from each other. Whereas in Southeast Asia and even East Asian countries, personal and professional lives kind of overlap with each other. Our family friends might also be business partners. Our business partners may become like very close family members as well. So what needs to happen sometimes is that you need to kind of build that trust and consensus, whereas it's kind of implied as you begin a business relationship in the professional setting that the trust is already there, but you still have a certain sense of wariness, whereas trust needs to be extremely concentrated on, especially as you're going into Southeast Asian countries and also with the local economies as well. So that can be one of the big challenges that Americans have for going into Southeast Asia. One of the things that I recommend, and also I think with Patty and Jesslyn as well, that you build up those personal relationships as well as those professional relationships, understanding that there's such a huge overlap, such a huge intertwining of everything, that you need to be able to build that trust. And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It can take months. It can take years. And so that's extremely important. Another thing too is that the regulatory environment, it's not the same way as it is here in the US, where you have things that kind of get left behind, and you have certain organizations here, like your local commerce department or your local, perhaps different regulatory agencies here in the US. There in Southeast Asia, you have lots of different agencies that you have to deal with. So having a local partner is very, very important. They understand the local infrastructure, they understand how things work. So understanding that you need to give some power to your local representatives for them to be able to determine what needs to happen. That's extremely, extremely important. I think the most common thread through all of these things is having a local partner that you believe and have the just to feel that they're competent enough to be able to handle things in the local expansion that you're going to be able to do in Southeast Asia as well. Competition. I think one of the case studies that we're going to talk about is Uber versus Grab. That was a huge failure of an American company going into Southeast Asia and also into China. A lot of assumptions that American companies have going into different regions is that, hey, we're American, we should be able to do really well in every country that we go into, not understanding local economies, not understanding that things the way that they work here in the US may not work very well overseas. It's a bit of an arrogance aspect, unfortunately, hoping that American companies kind of learn it a lot more as they go into do international expansion, but still, unfortunately, they're at this point in time. So getting those local partners that understand how it works on a day-to-day basis. How do people buy food? How do people buy online? Is there online buying? Is there an unbanked population that comes into fintech as well? How does logistics work? And those are big things that come into play. So those are really, really important things. I guess next slide. Okay, so big thing for Americans is infrastructure into Southeast Asia, because it is not as they perceive that American companies rely on the same infrastructure to be in the country that they're going into. So infrastructure may not be there the same way that it is in the US as well. So understanding the challenges, how does it work? How do products come from one place to another, especially if you're doing manufacturing? Are there going to be issues with power? Are there going to be issues of like there being outages, especially if you're doing manufacturing, that may affect how your products are created, how your computers are being on, and your developers being able to do those aspects. Those are really important things to be taken into consideration as well. Do you have backup generators? Do you think about bigger cities versus smaller cities as well? And that's a cost consideration as well. Language barriers. Not everyone speaks English. That is a common misconception that American companies have going into Southeast Asia. Local languages, maybe different regions have different languages as well. Kind of relying on your local partner to be able to be a translator for you, or to find partners or basically distributors, resellers that have the capability of speaking English as well. This has been a big thing, which is bureaucracy and corruption, because I think a lot of Americans are a bit arrogant in this way, believing that Southeast Asia, there is corruption across the board and bureaucracy across the board. There are those unfortunately common misconceptions, and I think kind of adjusting their understanding through a lot of education and an understanding of just becoming familiar with the area is really, really helpful. And I can't stress this enough about local partners being helpful to be able to understand better and who to trust and who to not trust, versus just hiring someone locally, kind of thinking that that person will do everything. In reality, there has to be a strategy, there has to be a thought process, a roadmap of how to be able to do country entry into different markets, because not all countries are the same in Southeast Asia. It's not a blanket policy when you kind of go forward with that. Shortage of skilled labor is really, a kind of a difficulty for American companies as well, because here in the US, we have tons of different people immigrating from different countries in order to be able to be that melting pot of skilled labor, whereas going to other countries that may not have the same skill set, or there's a learning curve. How to be able to develop, for AI, how to be able to develop for fintech, certain different manufacturing elements, getting people up to par and up to the same skill set as everyone else that you might have locally here in the US might be something different in Southeast Asia. So a certain amount of patience is needed, and different timelines are needed, especially in Southeast Asia as well. So next. Difficulty in finding decision makers. This is something that is extremely challenging, especially in the sales and marketing process, because here you can go on LinkedIn. You can be able to jump online, do company, go into Zoom info, find those decision makers, because usually it's public information. It's also easier to find if you find people going through who their investors are, etc., to find those decision makers. In Southeast Asia, it is not clear. A lot of companies are privately owned. They're owned by families. So to find who the decision maker is, if you're going into Southeast Asia primarily for market entry and also for market expansion, finding those people needs a little bit of understanding, a little bit of how to be able to find those key crucial decision makers is extremely important. Patty has been absolutely, and Jesslyn have been, absolutely amazing in this process for some of my customers that have worked, and even for my own company that I had, and Patty and Jesslyn were wonderful and helpful. Also, the next thing to talk about is sales timelines. Because of the difficulty in finding decision makers, it can either shorten or expand greatly your sales timeline. So a lot of companies are taking a look at these 30, 60, 90-day closes. That may not be the case, especially when they're doing country entry, especially as you're doing market expansion. Those can be able to take 6 months to a year to land your first sale in the region. So having that expectation and understanding that it will take a longer time to be able to get your first sales initially when you go into the region. And then after that, you find that cadence, that rhythm, as you figure out your sales process, your marketing process, who your partners are, do you distributors, resellers, your business model is going to be really important as you go into the region too. That will be really helpful. And then the last one in all of these things is management styles. Here in the US, they have this open door policy, which may not always be an open door policy, where there's an expectation of management to be able to speak up if there is anything happening that's challenging, anything that's happening that's causing problems. People are considered accountable. That may not be the same situation when you go into Southeast Asia, because of the they feel like there's going to be punishment or punitive actions if a person fails at their job, so that I have an understanding and have an assumption that it will take longer to build trust with your distributors, resellers, your employees that you have in the region, so that they can build that type of trust, that cadence, how to be able to work together. Here it's very corporate. It is a very type of matrixed organizations, whereas, in Southeast Asia, it is a different type of personality where it's built upon personal relationships and understanding and trust. So I think those are some big challenges that American companies have going into the region. So I'll throw it back over to Jesslyn to go on to the next piece.
Yeah, so that will be me. Yeah, Nancy, you're 100% correct. Yeah, it can be quite a bit of a cultural difference, and it can also be a cultural shock to many who enter into Southeast Asia and then couldn't quite figure out how come the difference of doing business between Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and all the countries. Okay, so let me cover this one. The ease of doing business in Southeast Asia. Okay, so if you look at on the screen here, it does look a bit like a periodic table. But let me just run it very briefly. In terms of the ease of doing business, I'm not going to compare, everything here. But one of the other things that we have to take a look is probably the first row. In terms of ease of doing business, okay, take note the numbers. The numbers is a pretty quite accurate representative, in the sense that other than this is actually a survey being done from World Bank itself. Even folks like us who experience it ourselves, we also understand that it can actually be quite a fair bit of a challenge. Okay, so let's say, for example, let's just jump in straight into, say, Thailand. Okay, when you're trying to do a business in Thailand, one of the biggest challenges, you can actually do a comparison between the year 2015 and 2020. One of the biggest challenges that for a lot of foreign companies when trying to do business in Thailand is that there is always this foreign owned. Is it 100% foreign owned, or is it majority is actually owned by the local Thai? Okay. Sometimes a lot of policies are being in place to ensure that foreign companies, when they set up their business locally, they have to respect the local requirements. They have to respect the local policies. For some countries, they have a certain policies to protect certain minorities or certain majorities or certain race, or just to make sure that their locals will not be disadvantaged by it. So in terms of the ease of doing business, well, as much as you can do a comparison, let's say for example like Vietnam, 2015 to 2020. Okay, the numbers are 64 to 70, or even in Indonesia, 59 to 70. So is this supposed to be easier? Is this supposed to be more complicated? The truth of the matter here is that it can vary quite a fair bit. Okay, so what do I mean? So let's say, for example, okay, if you are a fintech company trying to enter into Singapore, you have to understand that certain policies has changed over the years, okay, especially on the anti-money laundering, okay, or even policies that are based on your eKYC. Your KYC means that know your customers. So some of these, some of the government actually tightened it quite a lot due to various cases, and then also some of the countries are also make it much easier for you to come into operate. Like for example, in the recent year, countries like Malaysia, or even and as early as a couple of months ago, Thailand, when there's a new coalition government, sometimes the way policies that have been implemented, law regulations that have been implemented, may actually be undue, or maybe sometimes maybe even refined. Like in the case of, let's say, Thailand, like cannabis. Thailand is probably the only countries in Southeast Asia that actually legitimized cannabis. So this also created a lot of problems, especially for tourists who may unwillingly or willingly consume cannabis. So here's the thing: if you happen to be a business that's overseas, let's say you're from New York or you're from San Francisco, one of those, that you plan to come over to, say, Thailand to open a business on running medical cannabis or medical for whatever reasons, it may actually be easy when the local policies allow you to do that, or the local law allow you to do that. But when there's a change of government, that particular ease of business could have actually been wiped out overnight. So this is always one of the biggest challenge that a lot of foreign companies will always have to understand, that it may not actually be so straightforward. Okay, so let's say, for example, another case is like a trading across border. Okay, so let's say I think one of the biggest challenge that a lot of Southeast Asia countries are now facing is that the few dotted lines, highlighted by China. So, and then there's always a certain dispute that who owns this and who owns that. So that also creates a bit of a huge problem when companies try to move from one to another. Okay, Jaslyn. Sorry, can you go back to the slide, the origin? Yeah, okay. So like, for example, so like because of politics, situations and all this, sometimes the ease of doing business can actually be wiped out overnight. When especially you have other countries that probably put their flag in and say, hey, this belongs to me, that belongs to me, and that can actually be wiped out. So my suggestion is that when you're entering into Southeast Asia, do not just take information that were actually in the past, but always be ready that rapid changes can actually happen overnight. Especially things that you need to take note is that will there be change of government, will there be change of policies, the regulations and stuff like that. Because when that happens, there's always certain signal that they always give, such as the signal may be, okay, certain major illegal activities had happened. And then for that, you probably need to look into it and then start to study what is going on. So this is one of those ease of doing business in Southeast Asia. Complicated, but yet at the same time, if you're able to navigate around, you'll actually be okay. Next. Okay, setting up an entity. Okay, so very quickly, you can see on the slide itself the time required to start the business. Okay, of course, there are always things that were maybe unable to manage or unable to control, especially like recently, there have been a couple of situations where companies apply for certain licenses, and then when there's a change of government or there's a change of policies, things may actually get delayed. If you're talking about the time required to start a business, Singapore is actually considered as one of the more efficient ones. Okay, especially if you're a foreigner coming in here, setting a company is actually can be pretty fast. Usually the thing that get delayed is probably, when the banks will probably need to do an eKYC on you. Okay, so certain countries are actually not allowed, or certain citizens are actually not allowed to open their business or their operations in a certain country. So it's always important to check. And also at the same time, in terms of the, do you have to take care of the certain companies need to have a certain majority, or a certain setup will need to have a certain minorities, so that now they will actually be considered as fair to a lot of companies or to a lot of policies. Well, in terms of the numbers of procedures to register a business, I think one of the more complicated one, if you notice, can actually be like in Indonesia. So this is always important. If you are planning to set up an office or set up a company, best is that prepare, have a certain financial means, hire someone that is actually a bit more proper, a bit more legit, get them to help you to set up the company, rather than trying to do it yourself. This can actually save you a lot of time. Like example, like Laos or even like Myanmar, okay? It can be quite complicated if you're not able to understand, are you setting up an office in this particular locations versus setting up an office in another locations, because it can vary quite a fair bit. Next. Okay, so here's the thing. This is quite straightforward. You can actually see that these are some of the requirements. Take note, these requirements may change over time, but in general, it's pretty fixed already for most of it. Like example, like in Malaysia, you can actually be 100% owned by foreigners, but except for probably some sensitive, product sensitive industry. Okay, and then you also take a look at what are the kind of minimum directors and shareholders. So take note, some countries only allow you to have local directors, okay, and it has to be a physical and actual person. Whereas some countries, not necessarily listed here, they can actually allow you to have your corporate secretary to be nominated as a nominee director. So that can actually vary. So it's always important to find out exactly if there's actually any restriction on it. Like in the case of Malaysia, or in the case of Singapore, or even Thailand, it can actually be quite complicated if you are actually entering into a certain markets, which it can actually be cater only for the local markets. So this is something that you have to be a bit careful, especially let's say, for example, in Malaysia, you may actually be 100% owned, foreign owned, but certain projects they may not allow 100% foreign owners to actually bid for it. So this is always important to talk to your local corporate secretary to find out exactly what kind of business structures do you want to have. Okay, next. Okay, so I'm done on my part. So now let me pass it over to Jesslyn on the case studies. Thank you.
Yeah, so here we are showing some of the case study, which you can actually also scan this QR code to actually learn a little bit more. So in the chat box, you can actually take a look at the link itself that able to give you a first month trial. So these are some of the cases that we actually analyze, like why startup fail in this region in Southeast Asia. So some of the big cases like Honestbee, Zingo, people in this region are probably you are actually aware of all this brand, or you probably come across this brand in the past few years, right? Okay, so so in conclusion, right, many of the cases that we actually concluded the kind of like challenges that they face. The first main thing will be lack of localization. Okay, so a lot of them actually expanded too fast, and because expanded too fast, it may lose certain focus itself. So as a result, lack of localization is actually and scaling too fast are actually the two main things that actually the startup actually face based on the cases that we actually analyze. Okay, so navigating regulation as well as no local partner. Basically, it concluded what Paddy and Nancy also talk about when it comes to Southeast Asia, this unique market itself. Yeah. So these are the four main lessons that pretty much can conclude it. Partnership, making sure that you localize the offering to the context itself. Okay, this main thing, the next case study, you can actually take a look like why leveraging on some of the government program, working with government, in some cases will be important. Like for example, the cases like, Grab and Uber. Okay, so I think this is pretty much a global case where initially in Southeast Asia, there are actually a lot of like Uber over here, and it got bought over by Grab. So few main reason, based on what we actually observe also, localization. Okay, so when Grab actually started in Southeast Asia, in terms of like the marketing strategy as well as the features are already tailored and localized to different country in Southeast Asia. So like for example, one main thing, the cash situation. In some country itself, using cash is actually pretty prominent. So as a result, previously when Uber first came in, it is mainly focused on the card, because the reason of having taking Uber is also you go cashless, right? So it did not really work well in some of the market in Southeast Asia. So that pretty much help Grab actually differentiate itself. Okay. So, also some of the customized services actually happen, subsequently, like Grab Bike. In this region, Gojek also doing pretty well, Grab, Gojek, Bike itself. And then it also go into like Grab Food, Grab Express, things like that. Okay, Grab Express is basically delivering services on the spot itself. Yeah. So there are also safety initiatives that happen, and so in general, because in this developing country, certain part of the region itself, mobile phone may not be that advanced. So as a result, having too many apps may not be suitable for many of the phone. So Grab also went into looking into super app that actually help quite a number of like user to find the convenience of like downloading one app, able to use different services itself. So that is also the reason why Grab actually differentiate itself at the early stage, and then a lot of like local partnership actually happened during this period of time. Okay, so so these are the 6 main reasons that American businesses or even Southeast Asia businesses can look into to differentiate itself. Okay, so we are actually pretty much close to like 9 p.m. now. So at the moment, any question that anyone has, you can actually feel free to leave the question at the chat box.
Yeah, just feel free to ask us any questions. And if you do not have or you're shy to, you can always reach out to us. As Jessie mentioned, there are, we got a couple of ways to reach out. It can be through LinkedIn or through Facebook. So if you have any questions or if you feel the head or you want to do a private messages, just feel free to contact us also. So yeah, I will just leave it there here first. If it's not, then what we can do is that we can also share a bit more insights of some of the most common questions that a lot of folks like to ask. Okay, one of the things that I can really quickly run it through is that how do I get my money out? Okay, I think this is one of the most sensitive, and but yet something that a lot of people prefer not to ask. So, example, you're based in the US, you're based in New York. Okay, as we all know, their tax structures are very different. And we also know that there are tax in terms of the whether are you a local, you're a company, or you're individuals, working overseas. How does the tax structure work? I think that one I won't touch on it. I'll probably leave it to Nancy. But what I can share is that should you set up an office, let's say in one of the countries in Southeast Asia, do check out that any profit that is being made in the country that you are running your operation. Let's say you're running an operation in Indonesia, or running an operation in Malaysia, whatever profit that you make, that will go straight into your company that you registered in. But yet at the same time, when you're taking an income, whether are you paying yourself a salary or bonus or commission, whatever, it is always important to check, which law do you actually fall under? Because would there actually be a double taxation? Would there be actually, your tax where you work and where you live and where you stay and where you're from? Would there be any implication? I think this is very important because some of the clientele that we manage with, they actually did not really look into that, and almost immediately after the first year or second year, they got a surprise from their government, whether it's a local government or from the US side, saying that they actually suspect of evading tax or something like that, or even situations of when they sell their shares or when they sold the company. Do you have any local tax that you need to pay for? So I think it's always important to check with corporate lawyers, check with corporate secretaries on that, so that you don't get yourself into much trouble. Nancy, probably you want to fill out on that.
Yeah, actually, I always joke with my American clients is that always assume that the IRS wants their, bucket of skin. So basically, the idea is make the assumption that you're going to have to report pretty much everything to the IRS at this point in time. So especially if you're an American citizen living overseas, or you have American ownership in your local entity, make an assumption that you're going to need to report back to the IRS on your yearly taxes, your corporate taxes. So hire a competent accountant that understands the local taxes as well as US taxes too, because there's no such thing as international taxes. It's actually taxes based upon each country. So make that assumption. Another thing too is take a look at the ownership of the company itself, because if it's a foreign, completely owned by your American parent company, you definitely will have to do the IRS, file tax in the US with the IRS as well, versus having 100% locally owned company somehow tied back to the US corporation, parent-child corporate structure. So take a look at these things in consideration when setting up your company. That's really, really important. Another thing too is that as a personal, if you are an American citizen but living in another country, you're always going to have to file with the IRS as well. If you have ownership in a company, you sign any fiduciary papers, the company will definitely have to do things with the IRS too. So always make that assumption that you're going to have to do reporting both locally and back to the US government too. So those are a lot of things that you take into consideration. Another thing too is when taking a look at your corporate structure, how much money can stay in the local company. That might also be a way that you set up the company in the first place as far as ownership is concerned. So take a look at that, talk to the person, talk to the organizations that are helping set up your local entity, what might be the best beneficially. Lots of corporations do that. Even Microsoft does it here in the US about how much money stays in their local entity versus how much money comes back to the parent company. That's been a big point of contention here in the US about corporate taxes. So take those things into consideration.
Yep. So there's a question from Darius. Is a couple of questions. Maybe I'll just answer a few. But guys, please feel free to chip in also. So your question is that when hiring in remote countries away from HQ, is it better to hire from the local or bring your own staff from home base? So I'll answer this one first. Okay. First and foremost, it depends really much on where are you coming from. So let's say, for example, let's say you're coming from US. We have your East Coast, we have your West Coast. And if you're comparing, let's say you're bringing them into Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia itself, we have a few different time zones. So for example, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, or even Myanmar. So there are a few different time zones. So my suggestion will always be, if your projects or your, running around is actually mission critical, then you probably need to look into which market are you serving. If you're actually serving the Southeast Asia market itself, then naturally you need to have your support team. Not necessarily have to be physically here, but at least remotely, they should follow the time zone here to try to provide the necessary support. Case in point, let's say you're running a fintech company. Maybe you're looking into running an exchange, crypto exchange, or some of those, or even financial property supports and all this. Then you have to make sure that whoever that you hire has to fit into the local support. Partly is because in Southeast Asia, the service level agreement, SLA, can actually varies very, very differently. And the kind of penalties can also be very, very differently. Let's say, for example, in some countries, the penalty can be 10% of whatever that they paid you, and is part of the SLA. And then there will be different tiers also. So that's why it's always important to ensure that wherever the support comes from, it should also fits into your time zone. And then the second part of it is that if you're planning to bring your own staff from your home base, let's say example, come over to Singapore or go over to Malaysia, whatever, you have to understand that because of a certain law that the country may implement or by the Ministry of Manpower or equivalent, they will always have to ensure that you actually hire X number of locals before you can hire X numbers of foreigners. So sometimes there can be a ratio of 4 to 1, let's say 4 Singaporeans and then 1 foreigner. And then that foreigner has to be of a certain criteria. Maybe have to have a certain number of years of experience, certain salary brackets and all this. So it's not that they want to make it difficult, but they just want to make sure that the quality that is being brought in can actually help the local market instead of cannibalizing it. Nancy, you want to say something, or Jesse?
Yeah, actually, I do have some thoughts on this, having done it before. So I would say hire more locally first for the people that are actually doing the work, whether it's developers, whether it's manufacturing, because they understand how things are done better. And maybe very minimally bring in 1 or 2 people that are coming from the main parent company of the corporation to go into those other countries. And the reason why is that they will have an understanding what the expectations are from the headquarters. They will have an understanding about how things work. But the thing is, people actually doing the work and people actually, creating what needs to be, whether it's a product or service or anything, they will be able to really kind of do it according to how things are done locally. How they understand the infrastructure better. They understand how things work on a day-to-day basis. So I would say be lighter on the headquarters side and heavier on the local side, because that's part of the reason why you're going to that market, right? You're tapping the resources that are there, whether it's human resources, their ecosystem resources, or anything like that. So use that to your company's benefit in the first place, and don't try to export or as you're going into the other country, import the same type of things that you're doing with the parent company, because then that kind of does away with your strategic advantage. So you're really wanting to be local. That's how companies fail going into Southeast Asia. That's kind of part of the talk here. So I would say heavier local, and then lighter on the headquarters. Maybe even just doing hey, there's a country manager, or hey, there's a regional manager instead, and then the rest of it being a local work population.
Yeah, maybe I can also chip in this area, because I used to actually work in HR department that deal with a lot of expatriate, management. But actually depending on which industry are we talking about, because the company that I used to work in, right, it's actually in the oil and gas field, and it's very hard to actually get specific talent in that field itself, right? In this area, this region, I would say. It's not even in this country like Singapore, because Singapore is small. It's talking about the region. So there are certain skill set that you will still need to actually get from your home country to make sure that the knowledge transfer is there. So that is also the key thing, which is very common for some bigger companies. They would like to actually bring people from the HQ, people from the home country to the new market, especially when you first set up, at least for the first few years. So that's pretty common. Also in the perspective of high-tech company, because we actually help some of the clients also looking into some government grant, where the government grant is also looking into creating job opportunity for the locals, knowledge transfer. So it's actually very common that they will ask, do you have anyone anyone from the HQ or someone who have the knowledge that you can actually bring over to the new market, that we will actually help you to actually grow in that market itself. So that is also that can be one of the criteria also when it comes to applying for some of the programs that help you to actually land better. So to answer your question, depending on the industry itself, depending the expertise that you need, but definitely in terms of the cost wise, as what Nancy and Paddy rightfully pointed out, there's also some costs and regulation that you have to take note of when it comes to hiring foreigner in any of the market, any of the country,
Yeah, just to add on, it is something that's is an unwritten rule that if you ask any consultants or corporate secretary, they will probably not tell you much. But one of the things that if you're planning to scale overseas, I think one of the most sensitive things that you have to look at is the country or the people or the citizens there, do they have a negative perspective, a negative outlook of you from a certain country? Okay, so let me just put it as plain as possible. So for example, I mean, in the real world, there's always discriminations, whether is it from gender to race to, there's always, it's something that we can't deny. Yes, we are trying to make the world a better place, but realistically speaking, it sometimes takes a while, for the whole entire populations, or for the whole world to be educated. It takes time. So that's why if you are coming from a certain countries, going to another certain markets, you also have to understand, it's always important to understand that, to be a bit sensitive to that, so that when you enter into the country, you don't have a situations of everything is unknown to you, and then you enter, you set up the office, you bring your own people in, and you face the outright discriminations, and you face a lot of challenges, and that actually makes it very difficult for you to maneuver or even navigate around. So let's say case in point, okay, in some of the markets that we know of, that we handle, some of the clientele try to enter into certain markets, and the very first thing that they face is discriminations. Okay, and so they entered on their own, they started their business on their own, and then they came back to us and they look for us and say, hey, guys, we have a bit of a problem. We not able to understand why are we facing such kind of entry barrier. So we went in and we talked to them and say, hey, you know what? There have been a couple of situations where just some folks just don't like people from this particular country for whatever reasons. There's always certain cases. Okay, and then if this is the case, then you have to look into, is this a market that you want to enter on your own? Or could it be better that you are just going to be the one to provide the technology and then let the partners on the front to front it for you? That may actually be better. Okay, why? Because the last thing that you want to get caught on is that through no fault of yours, but because the government don't agree with each other, they don't see eye to eye, somehow certain policy changes and everything. And then especially for companies that are dealing with technology, you get stuck in between. Even though it's no fault of yours, you get stuck. And because when you get stuck, in between, you can't navigate, you can't maneuver. And that can actually kill your companies very quickly, because your goods may be stuck in the warehouse, your goods not able to import, not able to be exported, and that can actually kill your companies very rapidly. So it's always important to understand, read a bit of news, understand what is going on, and then if you have the financial capability, hire someone who actually knows what is going on and then navigate it for you. Thanks.
All right. So I guess we can probably end this session. If you have any question, also you can feel free to reach out to us, via any of the channels that we actually have. If you want to actually watch more other events, all this, you can take a look at the chat box. There's a link to the place where there are other events and stuff. Okay. So thank you. Have a good evening and have a good morning. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.